As an artist collaboration, we've given shape and depth to some of the most complicated topics of our time, making them easily accessible for those who seek to understand. We've given voice and space to the stories that often go ignored. Please take a moment to consider being a patron, make a donation, or join Rockfin. Thank you. Well, hello.
Hello.
How are you today?
How is everybody this morning?
Yeah, it's Celebrate CTE month, so we wanted to start with that. So if you didn't see that, let me
So
bring
what
that back.
does that stand for?
Well, our next guest is going to tell us about that.
Awesome.
Today we have somebody returning to Pullquote, our friend Lynne Taylor, the Common Core Diva.
Mm-hmm.
And Lynne is a writer and activist who focuses her attention on education, especially in the areas of Common Core education and the negative effects on children and society at large. In 2012, Lynne helped co-establish PIENC, Preserving Integrity and Excellence in Education. She's a retired private homeschool teacher and a board member for Heart for Homeschoolers Ministry, as well as a leadership team member for US Pi. And I think she told us last time that she's no longer involved with them, but we'll find out. She has been awarded the 2011 Distinguished Educator from the National Society of High School Scholars, as well as the 2016 L&B Network's Torchbearer Award for Educational Advocacy. Lynne has appeared several times before the NC General Assembly in efforts to preserve freedom in education. She is a co-host on Liberty Bells, a video podcast, a researcher and writer on her own blog, Common Core Diva. Lynne has been featured speaker at meetings and conferences and is a frequent guest on nationwide radio and podcast programs. And we welcome her back today to Pullquote. And hello, Lynne. Hi.
Hello. How are you today?
Good.
Hi,
Thanks.
Lynne.
How are you doing today?
Hi.
Thanks for coming
doing pretty good. Yes. Well, thank you for having me back.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you are the most frequent guest on
Right.
our platform.
Woo!
Yeah. You've become a regular here on Pullquote.
Oh, well, thank you. That's an honor. It really, really is. And I mean, that's a good thing for you guys too, because it shows that your audience is on what's going on in education. So that's a wonderful thing.
Trouble with our interface there. I accidentally made us go up and you down and us away, and yeah. So
that's okay.
I think that there's a lot of different things that are going on in the world, and I think that right now it seems as though social media is being dominated by the Joe Rogan Spotify controversy, and a lot of the things that are really important are getting pushed to the side. And so we want to stay focused. You know, 2 years ago when we started this foray into describing the fourth industrial revolution, the very first thing that we truly tackled with your help and with Allison McDowell's help was a video essay we did called Lifelong Learning, where we talk about how there are investments into impacting the behavior of children. We're seeing the rise of these impact movements in our own school district that we pay our taxes into. I have local parents that come up to me and talk about how proud they are of their children getting their badges and obeying orders as opposed to actually learning anything.
Right.
The masks are still on the children, despite the fact that there's no mask mandate in the state. So a lot of these really important topics are being forgotten. They're being pushed to the side as we have these really popular virologists or defense contractors dominating social media and even dominating, the mainstream news. And so we want to bring you back and get people back on track and get people focused, because there's legislation and there's various rules and laws that are taking place that operate outside of what's benefiting the children. So I really wanted to say thank you for coming back.
Oh, well, thank you. And you're absolutely right. The mainstream media, our administration, no matter what party's in place, they love to do this. And that's what we call kabuki theater, because it's going to help keep you distracted from what's really important. And, the Rogan stuff may have its moment, but we need to be, as you just said, we need to be more focused on what we're not seeing, because that's where our citizen action really needs to be gearing up. Because if we don't take that citizen action right now, we're not going to have any freedom or rights or anything left, because the totalitarianism that is permeating America now won't allow it.
Yeah,
exactly.
And I think that it's taking over all over the world as well.
Absolutely, yes.
We're seeing this. Something that we've been talking about for a while. We did in a video called Deconstruction, where we're talking about how nation states are going away and regional organization of states or governments are taking its place. And how its main goal is global governance.
Oh, absolutely. And we can thank the former administration for putting into place the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement, because that really set up a regional framework for the United States. Because, I did a show, and I can't remember which organization put it out, but they had this, it was almost like a clock. And in the middle was the USMCA and the governing bodies for it, which are from outside of America. But then all around the clock were all your different committees for like education or welfare or for you name it. And again, it was going to be decisions made for Americans, but not made by Americans.
Right. And a lot of those people are unelected committees.
Exactly. They're appointed. And who's appointing? It's not we the people.
No, definitely not. We're seeing that happen in, on a very, very local level. I'm still, I was appalled when, the school board gets together in our local area here to vote on certain policies or certain school rules, and they're still doing it through Zoom. And I was like, okay, I understood that you people were afraid of a virus 2 years ago, but why are you still doing it on Zoom? Can't we go back to normal, where we all get together and have a legitimate vote and a legitimate say in where our taxes go into the school district? They're still doing it on Zoom, which means that they can get cut off. So what you said earlier about how the voting public have been basically rendered silent, have been gagged. They don't have a say in the where the education is going and how it's affecting the children, the education. And we'll get into that, of course. But I just, I find it appalling that these rules that operate outside of law are still allowed to happen,
It's because we've allowed de facto rule to supersede the power that we, the people, have. Because if you look at our founding documents, you will see that it was set up so that we had limited control, and it was done at our bidding. And when that limited control got out of hand, it was up to us to go in, shut it down, fix it, and pull it right back up. But what we've become is a nation where we're too busy or too distracted to really give a darn, and we'll just let things ride. And if they run it into the river, they run it into the river, and we'll just go along for the ride.
Wow.
Yeah, and I'm sure that was a deliberate move, because you can point to World War II as being that sort of like point at which so much changes,
Right.
right?
Right.
And we went from being sort of a consumer society to a hyper consumer society, like after the war, right? And it's been that way since, and it's just risen and risen and risen. And it's made people, slaves to their own, bills, basically, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
And
it has.
and so, and in order to just like exist in the world, you have to have some, set of, tools that are around you, like, a car and a house and a, or whatever, whatever it is, in order to get around. I mean, we've talked a lot about how we get around by bike and by bus,
Yeah.
and that's very difficult around a place like Pittsburgh.
Right.
It's easy in San Francisco, and that's another whole other topic. But
Right.
I guess what I'm trying to say is that these things have been set into place. And we were listening to Julianne Romanello earlier, right before we started talking, and she was talking about how highways were put into place, and they bifurcated communities and split up communities and separated people. And it's these policies and these actions that have been put into place that have made the world the way it is now. We are too busy because of all the things that we're required to do in order to live a contemporary life, right? Which allows then for our our rights and our democracies and our and our lives to get taken away or modified in a way that does not benefit us. And we don't have the interest level, we don't have the time or the energy to put into fighting the things that they do in the background. And a lot of those things they hide anyway. Like, they'll sign bills like on, midnight on a holiday, at Christmas time or whatever, when people aren't paying attention.
Always.
And they'll do stuff like that. And it's disingenuous, and it's also very underhanded, and they've been doing this for a long, long time. And I'm sorry, I got away a little bit from what we're talking about.
You're absolutely spot on, because Julie, when you were talking about, you didn't understand why some of the school board meetings were going the way that they're going. What we're seeing here in my local area is that the school board, whether it's a holiday or not, they're still having their meeting. And even though the citizens have said, hey, we've had enough of what's been going on and we want to see things go differently, the reason why we're not seeing a change in the policies or the practices or whatever you want to call them is because of the amount of money that one more time has been thrown at supposedly solving the problem, but instead it's putting into place de facto rule.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're getting rules instead of laws.
Right.
Yeah.
And those rules supersede the laws. And I think a good example of that is the masking that Julie was talking about.
Right. It's a policy, and people have confused policy is equal to law. No. Law is cement. Okay.
Right.
Law is cement. Policy are the leaves from the tree that fall on the cement. And depending on which tree you're walking by is to what kind of leaf. So in other words, the type of think tank or group that's behind the policy, the interpretation of that law or concrete, as to what kind of policy you're going to get. So if I'm walking on the sidewalk, which is the law, and I go under an oak tree, that might represent, say, one policy interpretation. If I go under and I'm walking by a pecan tree, that's going to be a totally different leaf or a totally different policy, but it's based on the same law.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a great way of explaining it.
Wow, what a great visual.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
And I think that anybody who is new to, to the fact that we're being basically governed by policy and not law will start to really think about, what that means for them personally.
And then you get media outlets like the New York Times, like adding to the confusion. I read an article yesterday or the day before,
right.
And I think you did a post about it because I left it up so you could see it. And it was deliberately confusing, and it muddled the subject, and it had the give and the take. So they had, teachers coming out and going, well, I'm opposed to the masks because it's hard for me to teach what I teach to my kids. And I've had to do, workarounds to make this happen. Like this one woman is an English teacher, English as a second language teacher that they were interviewing. And then she comes back and says, but I would go out and march with my union if they insisted that we, if the masks were being taken away and the union didn't want that, I would march with the union. And I'm like, what
oh my goodness!
Yeah, so there's a lot of disconnect, a lot of cognitive dissonance. It's like two thoughts living within both sides of your brain. She wants them. She criticizes the muzzling of her own face and her children's face because it is impeding the education process. But then if there was an opportunity to take away that impediment, which happens to be the muzzle or the mask, she would fight against that. So again,
which side of the fence is she going to be on? Because what happens if you ride the fence, you're going to get a bottom full of splinters. You got to get on one side or the other and stay there.
Right.
I love the Southern effort. Is that what it is? Basically.
Well, you have to call it what it is sometimes. And this, I think, is part of the problem is people are not just being, whether it's humorous about it or not. I mean, that's going to get you to really look at it from a different perspective, as we should be. Because if we're not really recognizing that we can't just keep going right down the middle, what are we going to see people do? They're going to stay right down the middle. And then they're going to wonder why it all imploded. They have to get on one side or the other. And I think it's, let your yes be a yes, your no be a no. It's that's simple.
Right.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, I would like to talk about this whole, our background, which is very odd for people. People are probably like, what is this Celebrate CTE thing that you're showing?
We're putting it up in irony.
We're putting it up ironically.
Yes. And if they can't see the little tagline, why don't you read it for them? Because that to me is more alarming than the image.
Well, you know what? I'll just expose it. Okay, so I'll hide us. Okay.
Here we go.
All right.
So hopefully. Is education that directly prepares students for high-wage, high-demand careers. So, hey, that sounds great, Lynn. What's wrong with that?
Well, let me tell you a little story based on my research. Career tech education, at one point in time, when it was first trotted out, first of all, it replaced the terminology vocational technical. Okay, so I know a lot of people, myself included, I remember going to high school, we had shop class, it was VOTEC, okay? I understand that. But career tech education came along about the time of Common Core. And the reason I know this is because on my blog, in my archives, you can find where at one point it was Common Career Core Technical Education.
Wow.
So Common Core was where? Literally in the middle of the title. But when the crap hit the fan on how toxic Common Core was, the people who were behind the adult version, because that's what the career tech education is supposed to be, said, we've got to get the Common Core out of career tech education. So they pulled the words common and core out, left the career tech education in, and then tried to snowball everybody into the fact of there's no Common Core in it. There's no Common Core in it. But if you look at the publications, if you look at the archives and you see the standards, JP and Julie, you will see that while they were geared for supposedly adult education, the standards began on a second grade level. I kid you not.
Wow.
And the justification was Well, after all, we're dealing with adults. We don't know if they're coming out of incarceration. We don't know if they're coming out of the service. We don't know how long it's been since they've been in an educational setting or anything like that. So we're going to put these standards at such a low level that anybody can come in and pick up, but yet this is supposed to be for adults to go out there and handle heavy machinery and things like that. And what more happened was when they saw this, they're like, okay, we're going to throw this back into K through 12 education. So when the student longitudinal data system got set up through Common Core, okay, it was there all along, that permanent record, okay. But when the Department of Education created this data tracking system from the student side, the Department of Labor came in and said, oh, well, we can't leave this alone. So they brought in the career tech education, the STEM, all these other, the apprenticeships, the internships. They brought this in through the Worker Quality Data Initiative, another data tracking service. And they married the two to make a continuum throughout cradle to grave data tracking for career slotting.
Okay.
Wow.
So this term, cradle to grave, career tracking, this is really, it just feels so controlled and so oppressive to me.
It absolutely is.
It's technocratic and bureaucratic at the same time.
Yeah.
Right. Well, this is setting up our case system. And, you guys have done a brilliant job on illustrating that in so many different arenas throughout our country, throughout our world. And, we've had people warning for years, we don't need to do this in education. We don't, education should be about feeding the mind, not controlling it. Because if you look at past history in American education, you will see we had students coming out of school in the 12th grade who could think their way out of a paper bag, who could go and apply for a job, and the job would say, okay, you've got this nice foundation. We're going to literally build upon that so that you can work here. Otherwise, we wouldn't have people who've been at their job 40 and 50 years who were able to stay there, advance, and retire and take care of themselves. No, we now have the government coming in going, oh, no. This test we have to give Johnny and Susie that will slot them into what their career track should be. Has to be in place now. And if we don't have that, then when they get out of high school, first of all, we won't know where they're going. Second of all, we have to control where they're going. And, we set it up so that it's a hurry up to learn, but learn what? Skill-based education.
Right. So that skill-based education, it's sort of cookie cutter. They're creating these people who fit really well into, like, say, the corporate sector, and they know all the talking points. They know how to speak the language, and they know exactly what to do and how to operate within that context. And it's no longer about humans, and yet you hear all this propaganda and lies about how corporations are changing, and that they're becoming more humane, and and they're creating environments that are make people happier in their jobs, and that's a load of crap. It's it's just more conformity.
Absolutely.
But disguising that conformity as something that's more human based.
Right.
BS, absolute BS. Well, let me help back that up. The Business Roundtable, a lot of your big corporations, they got on the bandwagon for the skill-based education when Common Core was rolled out, because not only did it bring in the career tech education, it brought in the STEM, which is the science, technology, engineering, and math, which also is supposed to help build you up for a job. But if we look at the roots of that, not only does it marry right into the Common Core, but it goes in with that global one size fits all education.
Sure.
And we know that Bill Gates signed that One World curriculum with UNESCO back in 2004. We know that the United Nations came in and influenced the National Science Foundation, which is a United States non-government funded organization, to come up with an acronym to know everyone
Wow.
on how great the Sustainable Development Goals are. And that's why we have STEM, STEAM, and STREAM.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
There
What
you
is
go.
now? What is stream?
That's
People.
the Catholic version's contribution to the United Nations.
Yeah.
Wow.
STEM and STEAM. Okay, STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math.
Mhm.
STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. STREAM, science, technology, reading, writing, engineering, arts, and math.
Right.
Wow.
Wow.
Wow, you know, and it's they always use, you know, the like you said, they snow job everybody,
Mhm.
but you know, they always use this progressive feel good language, which is very
Mhm.
corporate,
Right.
you know,
Mhm.
very
Right.
beige, and you know, it's like, well, how can you argue with that? It just sounds so good and so nice.
Well, let me tell you what the Every Student Succeeds Act did, okay? On
Yes.
page 17, it says, now remember, we're not even supposed to have a federal education law in the first place. So this whole thing is unconstitutional. But what happened on page 17, and this is where a lot of people hear that language, JP, and they're just thinking, oh, this is great, you know? But it said, all education must be aligned to the same post-secondary readiness standards as laid out in the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act.
Wow.
A few pages later, it says that all educators have to be credentialed to teach those same post-secondary readiness standards. Now, let me tell you how this is the flowery language. First of all, people assume that all education means public school students. If you know anything about how DC words their bills, they do play word games with us. When they use every and all, that does not mean a certain group. It means everyone and all. And by taking a K through 12 education law, which it formerly was, okay, and attaching that it has to have the same post-secondary readiness standards as laid out by the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, you just increased it from K through 12 to cradle to grave, and no one saw that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Ooh. Okay.
So
Can you name the act again, please?
It's the Every Student Succeeds Act. Okay, this was signed into law by President Obama back in 2015. He even did a press conference where he said it was the greatest Christmas gift we could ever give our students.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
you don't want
in
to
the
hear what I
pants,
said to
right?
that. You
Wow.
don't want to hear what I said to that. I do have an image, though, on my blog where I did take some Christmas presents and I laid out exactly what those presents were full of for all education choices. And see, that's the thing people don't understand is, again, it's not just public education. When you take cradle to grave, you're impacting every type of educational choice out there, including homeschooling. And don't miss that part where it said all educators. It didn't say teachers. It used the word educator
Educators.
because we're redefining what a teacher can do, who the
Mhm.
teachers are, and it's a broader term to rope in what? More people for cookie cutter control. And
Right.
don't miss the fact that these high stakes assessments given to all of us, okay? If you're in school, of course, they're going to be there. But if you go down to, say, your state run Department of Labor to apply for a job, you're going to get what's called either work keys or some sort of career assessment. Okay.
Mhm. Right.
I watched a YouTube video by the person who wrote the work keys. And he was smiling the entire time about how great it was because we can pigeonhole where people best need to learn so that they can learn this one skill. And I'm thinking, okay, I guess if you're just going to do that one skill for the rest of your life, that'd be one thing. But you know as well as I do, we have many skills because we wear different hats throughout our day. We're not always on air. So we have that on air hat. But let's say if we're, working somewhere else, we have to wear that hat. So we can't just be a one-trick pony. But he was bragging about this. But he used the city, one of the big cities in Arizona. He used this as an example because they were coming in and they had these new job opportunities. Okay. The city did. And so they were like, okay, everyone, if you're interested in these new job opportunities, we need you to take this test. And it was the work keys. So for example, we had the garbage. Okay. A lot of the garbage people came in and they wanted to take the test because they're like, hey, I really like doing garbage, but hey, if there's room for improvement and I could get a better pay job and, do something different, I'm going to, see what's there. So they took the test and almost everybody scored really high on something that was so out of their wheelhouse besides collecting garbage.
Right.
So the city invested all this money to train them for whatever this test said, they're better suited for. They went through the training. They took the job. Okay. The city hired other people to take their place on the garbage truck. They get so far into this track and then they start talking and they realize how miserable they are in this new opportunity, this new job. Pay wasn't all that much better. They were happier being garbage guys and girls. And so that's what they wanted to go back to, but they couldn't because their jobs had been taken.
Wow.
Right. Plus then they'd be told that they're overqualified for the job.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
You've just watched a city government create supposedly a problem, a solution, and then make a worse problem.
Right.
And that's what we're seeing on a national level.
Right. And, and it just furthers the immiseration of people, placing more stress and more misery and more, everything on people, which makes them more pliable and like what we were talking about in the beginning, to where they don't know how to fight these things.
Absolutely. Now, let me point out one little thing, and then we can move on however you want to. But don't think it's just your big corporations, because I watched, and it's, again, all this information I'm talking about you can find on my blog. But there was this one video that this small employer from the state of Georgia did for the work keys. And basically, Julie and JP, what he was telling you was the reason why you need to take this work keys assessment is because if you don't, you can't get a credential. And if you don't get a credential, you can't go apply for a job at his place of business. Well, think about what happens if you don't get a job. Can you pay the bills? Can you feed your family? Can you do much of anything?
Right.
No. Not in the way our society runs. Now, it used to be when we didn't have the society that we do, that, you didn't need a job because what you were doing to provide for your family was your job.
Right.
But we don't live in that society anymore. So that might not be a really good example. But my point is it's a really scary thought when you have this small business person telling you, well, don't apply because if you don't have this certain kind of credential, then, you can't work. And all throughout a lot of our states, and I've seen this especially through some of my travels, you will see some counties where as soon as you cross the county line, you'll see we're a work-ready county. Right. What that means is they've aligned to the work keys.
Got it. Okay. Wow. So that's actually say that one more time for our audience. When you enter a county line.
Oh, when it says it's a work-ready county, that means that they've aligned to this career tech education, the STEM, the work keys, all of that. Right. That means that's precisely what you're going into. So
it almost feels kind of like military recruitment.
Right.
You could absolutely apply that.
It feels like that.
There's no opportunity or no room for second careers or different, unless you get that credential, right?
Right.
And here's the sick thing about the credentials. They're color coded.
Nice.
And I did an article one time where I equated it to the Olympic gold, silver, and bronze.
Interesting.
because that's how they've got them laid out is, of course, the gold means that you could go across the nation with a trackable credential or digital badge that allows you to work all kinds of places. Now, of course, if you have the bronze, you can only go like right here.
Of course.
Yeah.
And of course, each color is going to be designated towards, say, like opportunity zones where there are disadvantaged neighborhoods.
It's
right?
creating more of the, well, here in North Carolina, we've talked about this. They call them prosperity zones. And it regionalizes your state. But again, we also had that kind of mandate for assessments in the Every Student Succeeds Act because it said, now, we know Betsy DeVos was lying through her teeth when she said, Common Core is dead. No, because Career Tech is still here. Common Core is still showing up on some of the resources. So yes, Common Core is still here. It's here to stay. It has to, because too much money, too much agenda has been pumped into this education to turn it from academics into trainable monkeys.
Trainable monkeys.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
wow.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's true. And I think that, what we're seeing with like automation in various sectors, we've been talking a lot about the trucking industry and how, here in this particular little area, and it's not going to last long. It's like some of the last jobs that people who are unskilled or, just with a high school education, if even that, have an opportunity to get as a good paying job. Right.
It's to be a truck driver. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you a little bit about that. That was roped into the infrastructure bill. And I did a couple of shows on why we needed to be very, very concerned, because one of the things they were going to do, one of the things they are doing is they are enticing teens to now go get a trucking license. I'm not saying they shouldn't. That should be their decision. That should be their family's decision if that's what's best for them. But here's what the government has done. Enticed it. Now, think about this think about this if you're a parent and you're listening. You're already nervous enough when your kids go through driver's ed with a car. It's a 2-ton weapon.
Right. It is.
How many tons is a semi?
40.
A lot.
Okay. A lot more. I don't know. 100 tons.
You can kill and harm and destroy with either the car or the semi. But think about how long it takes your child to get comfortable with a car.
Right.
And now take that same immature child and throw them in a semi.
Right.
To me, as a parent, oh, hell no.
Right.
If you're going to be a truck driver, let's get some driving in a car. Let's get used to years of driving in a car so that when you step up to a huge machine like that, you have the skills, the brain power, because you've got not only a trailer behind you, you've got cars all around you. You've got gears. I think there's like 20 gears in one of those. Okay.
Yeah.
There's so much more to driving than just making a paycheck, but that's not what is being sold. What's being sold is a paycheck.
Right.
Well, even going to technical school, you're not going to learn that kind of intuitive know-how for handling a vehicle of any kind, just at trade school. But then on top of that, I was thinking before you started talking about the inexperience that this young driver would be going into a vehicle that's just not appropriate.
They're enticing teenagers to get trucking licenses.
Right. But so they have to get the training first. They have to get training in order to get that commercial license. And that training costs a lot of money.
Right.
So all of a sudden you get a teenager in debt. And educate, and it's the equivalent of like, college debt or whatever, college education debt, which never goes away. You cannot get out of it if you file for bankruptcy.
Right. Well, you can't absolve yourself from it. And so this goes back to the very, very beginning, which is this idea called lifelong learning, where your entire life you are signing up for programs to learn something that may or may not benefit you in the long run. And we believe that, and we've seen enough evidence of it, even in our local community, and mainstream media and corporate media and all of the tech blogs have been talking about this since at least 2017, if not before, that we are automating our supply chain. We are automating the cars and the trucks on the road. That's happening.
Yep.
So here you are, enticing a teenager who doesn't know what they want to do with with their life, and you're telling them what an exciting life on the road that they could have by getting a truck driving license, only in a few years to have that job be irrelevant because it's going to be taken over by the children who are now in this CTE program where they're learning the technology. So ultimately, what it's going to mean to be a truck driver in the future is you will be a young person managing 20, an entire fleet of automated trucks from your keyboard. That's what it's going to mean to be a truck driver in the future, not what you think of when you hear the term truck driver.
I think that those truck drivers that are being trained today and going into debt for it,
right,
will be the ride-along humans for the first generation,
right,
of these automated, and it's the pay. They're going to take a pay cut doing it,
right.
Well, absolutely. But this is why we're seeing such an increase in career tech education and STEM over this coding.
Right.
Where the heck do you think why do we need so many people who can code? Because it's going where? On the keyboard. So training those monkeys,
Right. And we were talking about how some of the coding that they're creating, these new applications that allow for coding that you don't need to necessarily know how to type. You can just move things around on your mouse. And as long as like Blockly, for instance, that Google program that allows, kids, it teaches young children how to organize phrases that would be like bits of code.
Right. They're teaching children how to code.
So they're teaching them how to think that way, like in coding, parlance, I guess is the lack of a better word. I know the word, I just can't think of it right now.
No, you're absolutely right, because I'm trying to remember, it was through, I think, one of my older articles, and it was based on, and I don't know which egghead decided to name February as Career Tech Education Month, but it's been that way for years. But anyway, on the blog, there is an article I wrote. It was called An Open Letter to the Career Tech Educators. And it basically was saying, hey, did you know you're signing up to do A, B, C, and D? And how can you live with yourself if you're doing A, B, C, and D? And if this is really what you want to do, then, let your students know this is where your agenda is. But if not, start being part of the solution.
Got it.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was basically the letter.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk to you about just that, the being part of the solution. So a lot of parents are holding up the idea, and I know we've talked about this before, but I like to concentrate on a clear-cut answer to this. They're holding up the idea of homeschooling as being a solution to this, to these changes that are taking place,
and the Great Reset.
And I'm dubious that homeschooling is really the answer. I think a lot of parents are reacting to the fact that they're so distraught over seeing their children in a mask 8 hours a day that they've yanked them out of school, and they've went ahead and got their homeschooling credentials, and they've started homeschooling because they're just so afraid of the school system now for some I'm not saying that the masking of the children is not as important as everything else we're talking about, but they're kind of distracted with the muzzle, the visual, not realizing that the homeschool option is probably not much better. So could you expand on that a little?
There would, let me see. Give me a second. I have always been of the mind that, if public school was right for you, go for it. If homeschooling was right for you, go for it, And because it was right for my family, that's what I did for 23 years. And when I would go to speak at conferences on education, people were like, well, you're not going to try to convert me to homeschooling, are you? And I'm like, no, will tell you about the benefits. I will tell you about, the other things that are out there. But again, if this is what you feel is best for your family, fine. If you don't, I'm not going to sit here and criticize you and judge you on the choice that you made for your family, because that's your family.
Right.
Now, that was before all this stuff happened. As far as the shift, when we started seeing back in 2008, 2009, when we started to see that Common Core and global curriculum was starting to infiltrate homeschooling, that's when my radar went up. That's why I even got into this genre of education activism, okay? Because I knew if it was coming for homeschooling, it was already well advanced in the rest of the choices. And so I was thinking, okay, since I'm a leader in the homeschool community for not only my community, but my state, I need to be finding out how this is going to impact us so that we can be part of a solution instead of just, hanging on and saying, oh crap, here they come after us,
Mm-hmm.
But when I started seeing that, and it was an article by Tom DeWeese with American Policy Center. He was writing on how this globalization for skill-based education was coming, and that we needed to be prepared no matter what choice we were in. Then there was another article about how Common Core was starting to come in, and that one was by a career reviewer called Kathy Duffy. I don't think she's with us anymore, but Tom still is, and he's still, out there telling you about, hey, here's how the Sustainable Development Goals are going to mess you up. But anyway, the point of it is that homeschooling was always intended to be infiltrated.
Okay.
On my blog, and I'm sorry I took so long to answer that, but
That's okay. Yeah.
I wanted to give you some context, because without it, you wouldn't understand why a homeschooler now needs to be very concerned. Okay. But there are UN model homeschool clubs. There are homeschool clubs for STEM, for career tech education. Homeschool Legal Defense Association is a Trojan horse,
Okay.
because they're sitting there saying, we'll champion the homeschooler, but at the same time, they're saying, go for those education savings accounts, go for those career tech education courses, go for those apprenticeships and those STEM scholarships. They're backing up the same garbage that's in the public system, and they're doing it on purpose because they have an agenda as well. And it's not to preserve and protect homeschooling as we knew it. It is to help them support the fallacy behind school choice.
Right.
School choice was wiped out on that mandate that all education had to be the same, and no one is listening. And this is what frustrates me. So yes, in some instances, homeschooling can be a preservation, but with the way that COVID has infiltrated in the name of safety, your home, in the name of education, I would be very, very concerned. Any agency, be it a school district or whatever, that tells you as a homeschooler you have to have a credential, run. You don't need a credential to teach your own children. You don't, unless your state has that mandate. Now, here in North Carolina, I have to have a high school diploma, a GED, or a college degree. That's it. I don't have to have a teacher's license. But with that other mandate about all teachers having to, all educators having to be credentialed, that's a big warning. That is a huge warning that we need to understand, because in the name of COVID, like the CARES Act, the American Rescue Plan, the Every Student Succeeds Act, emergency relief funds, every one of those, Julie and JP, have billions of education dollars to infiltrate what goes on in your home in the name of education.
Got it.
We've seen homeschooling, the term, bastardized by this system. We've seen states like North Carolina go in and purposely rewrite laws that were to protect homeschooling and mainstream them. So this has been in the works for years.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, and
That is very helpful.
that is
Thank
very
you for
helpful.
your passionate response.
And that backs up something that we said but didn't really go into very much in our lifelong learning video, and that is that even if you teach your kids in homeschool, even if you're going to that in that direction, you're still going to have to teach them in a way where they get their badges and they meet certain criteria and all these things, but what we said as a caveat was, if you're not going to do that and you're homeschooling your children, you better prepare them to live a life that's in an alternative stream to what's going on.
Right.
Absolutely, because a lot of people have sold out to the fallacy that dual enrollment, AP, IB, all these other acronyms in education are somehow escaping this cookie cutter. But what they don't understand is that IB is nothing but fascism.
Wow.
AP has been so dumbed down. And if you look at the assessments that go along with it, I mean, I just did a show with Suzanne on Liberty Bells where we were talking about how the SAT is now being dumbed down, if you will, because it has to be easier for Johnny and Susie to take, because after all, not everybody can test on the same level.
Oh, well, there's your equity. Okay.
That's equity and inclusivity. So I wanted to talk to you about the SATs,
Yes.
and in some areas, I guess they're called the ACTs, depending on what region you live in the country. So they have been reframed, right?
They absolutely have. They have to align to the Common Core state standards. And here's the problem. If you're a homeschooler and you've been able to escape every bit of the Common Core, the STEM, the career tech education, go take one of those to get into the college you want to go into. And guess what? You might not do so well because they're not aligned to the standards that you used or didn't use.
Right.
Yeah. And so you're too smart and you think in a different way.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you have parents out there that, sorry to interrupt you. You have the parents out there that are totally on board with you. I've talked to them. I've met them, usually through social media, but they're there. They get it. They understand that this, sort of global corporate, cookie cutter type education is now infiltrated every aspect of whether it's homeschooling or public school or private school. And so they're like, where do we go? Like, I don't want my child to be I don't want them to have any part of this. Where do we go? Like, where do they go?
I would say that probably the biggest help you could be is band together. If you know where these like-minded people are, start hanging out together. If you're too whatever to not be in person, then of course online. But here's the thing, showing up in number physically still carries a huge message. But go to the school board meetings, start looking at, like I brought up earlier, we've got people going to school board meetings here and demanding to know, why are we still holding policies in place when we don't need to? Why is our school district being micromanaged? I would say get in there, find out what accreditation body is over either your local school board, your community college, your school of choice. Okay. Look at the accrediting body, because 9 times out of 10, they're going to be the ones who are micromanaging every decision that comes through your school board. And if it's not accreditation company, look to your city, because your city council, your county commissioners are just as in on it.
Right.
I mean, they're the ones who are coming in and but see, they go to the watering well first. They get the water, they carry it back to the school district or the taxpayer and trot out this supposed water can that's full of all this great stuff. And then, people drink it and they're like, oh yes, we have to build a career tech education high school. Have you noticed those are starting to increase? It's not just a high school anymore. No,
Right.
it's a college
Definitely
and technical
where we live.
high school, or it's a STEM school, or that's not by mistake. But you've got
Right.
a lot of people who are drinking that water thinking that it is. And so if we could get to those people who help make these decisions, that's where I'm saying that we need to start. Second of all, taxes. Taxes fund this. And if it's not our taxes, we're seeing an increase in the public-private partnerships, which means it's either private money infiltrating public entities, or it's public money being controlled by private entities. So either way, you lose.
Right.
Because that's it's a pay as you go, pay for success. That's why these education savings accounts are so toxic, is because that's precisely what it does. And it takes the control away from the family, away from the parent, and gives it to whoever doled that money out. So let's say, for example, it was your school board. Well, you just sold your family out to the school board. If it, God forbid, it's a private company that's come in and said, okay, we're going to partner with your school system to bring about this education savings account. You just sold your kid to that private entity.
Right.
This is why we have to be so careful. And one of the things that is on the table in DC right now is called the Open Schools Act. And the reason why I'm trying to shift over there is because this is a huge example of the bait and switch. Okay. It is HR 6380 called the Open Schools Act. Supposedly, in the name of COVID, Congress has discovered that not only are Johnny and Susie's learning gaps becoming so big that the government has to come in and intervene, the mental health disparities and the outcomes for our citizens is so great that the federal government is now creating a grant system through the Department of Education to not fund teachers' unions or not throw money at schools, but to throw money at the parents in the name of COVID safety for education.
Wow. Yeah.
Now,
That's sick.
Now, here's the thing. You have to have at least one child enrolled in the public school system if this becomes law. Right now, it's in a bill, okay? But you have to have at least one child enrolled in your public school system. If you have more than one child, great, fine, and wonderful. The cap for the grant that goes to each family, are you ready? $10,000 per family across America.
Wow.
Now, you think, oh, goody, this is going to give me educational freedom. I can go and I can get all these homeschool resources, or I could go to this career tech education school, or I could go all these different places. No, because on the page, after it tells you how much you're getting, it tells you, here's where you can spend it.
Right. So Open School Act is just, again, they use words to hide the true meaning. Really, it's the schools that we say you can go to.
Right.
School Act.
One of the things, I'm sorry, Julie, let me say this. And one of the things that is just so absolutely ironic is it tells you, okay, you're trying to find an alternative source because the school that you're going to is shut down. And that's the whole premise of this. If your public school is shut down, get this grant. And of course, you have to jump through hoops to get the grant. Get the money, then we'll tell you how to use it. But one of the things that it says is it gives you money to attend a public school. What?
What? Right.
No. You don't need to pay fees to go to a public school.
Right.
Because a public school is supposed to be what?
Public.
Right.
And
that's
public. Right.
So this is what is so absolutely asinine. Then you see where it goes in and it tells you for private tutors, for career tech education, for homeschooling expenses. And look to Alaska a few years ago because they had a very similar program. Now, I understand in Alaska between weather and distance, because it is a huge state and sometimes it snows so much you can't get out the door. I understand the premise that the state said, okay, homeschoolers, if you want, we'll give you this grant for you being able to educate at home. A lot of people took the bait because they're thinking, oh, goody, this means that curriculum that I've been wanting to get that has been aligned with my family values, attitudes, and beliefs, I can now afford. What they got in return, though, were packages after packages in a consistent basis of 800 or more pages from the state system that they had to implement into their homeschooling. That was bringing in something that was totally different than what these homeschoolers were teaching. But it had to kowtow to the state standard because they took the state money.
Right. Okay. So that's very interesting, because that kind of ties into what we've been talking about with, like, impact investments, and why so many people and organizations that were once radical leftists are now basically Democrats, and going along with the whole COVID scam, and the things that they used to demonstrate against with government overreach, or with whatever takeover was going on, that they would protest and like stand against. They're now going along
Embracing
with
it.
And we were talking to Paul Kudnek of Winter Oak at one point, and I think the first time we talked to him, and he was talking about how he saw how these organizations that he was affiliated with through the various protests that he would attend, his comrades, as it were, they started changing the way that they were thinking, and that they were accepting these grant funds and this money. And so with that money, and this is what we've been saying all along, but really didn't have any proof or any evidence of it, is that they have to that along with the money, they start having to do certain things in order to justify taking that money. And that basically ties up that knot for me, because if they're doing it with the education, they're going to do it in other sectors as well, just like they're doing with everything else.
Right.
Absolutely. Well, this is one of the first bills that I've seen where we're not hiding, or Congress is not hiding their intent. And that is to absolutely come in and take control of your family. They also use the term learning pods and micro schools. Well, now micro schools were cooked up as an education alternative by the public-private partnerships, especially your big corporations. I've done articles on those. Those learning pods, that is a supposed solution in the name of COVID. But what we found out, and I'll use North Carolina as an example, is because of COVID, anything that can be slapped on the same pig, different shade of lipstick, is going to work. And the learning pods are being roped in with what they're called a PSU, which is a public school unit. In other words, it's an extension of the public school. And if that learning pod happens to be in my home is now considered what? A public school unit. Right. An extension of the public school. And again, this goes back to, if you're doing virtual school through a public funded system, you're getting the same agenda. You're not homeschooling, you're computer schooling.
Right.
Wow.
And any person who will tell you that a charter school is exempt from this stuff is smoking dope.
Right.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the charter schools and how they fit into this, because a number of years ago, the Pittsburgh Public School District basically sold most of their schools over to charter school grant contracts, and and those charter organizations took over those public buildings. And now there's a lot of abandoned public school buildings in Pittsburgh as well.
Absolutely. Well, the charter schools are run by a corporation.
Yeah, of course.
And they totally rip out the parental voice. But that's been the technocratic goal all along. If you look at the global summit out in California, okay, Silicon Valley's global summit, okay, that was it. There's a whole bunch of the technocrats, Gates and Apple and all those idiots, okay, Musk, Bezos, all of them. There's a 15 plank platform that they created, and right smack dab in the middle is to kill all the school boards. Because if you kill all the school boards, now figuratively, okay, not literally, but if you kill all the school boards, you take away the parental voice, you take away the parental interaction, and you replace it with corporate, and that's what's happening.
Right.
Wow. Okay.
So it sounds like I was listening to another podcaster, early this morning while I was getting ready to talk to you, and they were criticizing the young global leaders that came out of Davos, like Jacinda Ardern, who's the leader of New Zealand, Gavin Newsom, who's the leader of California, Trudeau, the leader of Canada. So it sounds like what they're trying to do is emulate something like that when you're talking about this Silicon Valley conference, where they're trying to target and take down the school boards and create these, corporate automatons.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Oh, well, just very quickly. So the personality of those, three that I just mentioned, they are not very bright. They only operate within the corporate, the latest memo. Exactly. And so that it sounds like that's what we're trying to create is a bunch of corporate reports, which again is something that we talked about in lifelong learning 2 years ago. So
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. And as we've said during this show and other shows, it's not a one party problem. So,
No.
if you happen to be the other party and you're listening to this, yours is just as responsible.
Sure.
It really is, because they know no difference. They are paid by the same special interest groups. They are owned by the same corporate idiots.
Well, what was it you tweeted this morning? Something about your worldview is basically, this is what we've been saying too.
Right.
Your worldview is what it comes down to. Either
Right. So basically what I said, and you would agree with me on this as well. And I think many people across, many different platforms have been saying this. So it's not just me, but I specifically said, we have to get away from this idea that we're in a left-right party system, and we have to go towards, and what is really the grounding issue, the real true issue in life right now is whether you are part of the individual way of thinking, where you are an individual and you want what's best for your body and your mind, because we're talking about education on today's show. So it's all about what's in your mind, and it's unique and an individual choice, or you go with the common good. Some people call it, some people call it collective. We like to use the word common good because it relates to fascism, which is what all of this is. So
because even the Amish are collective, right? So
right.
Right. Oh my gosh!
But in a good way. In a good way.
Right.
They've maintained their individuality. They've maintained their individual presence in Pennsylvania. They've stood strong against
a collective autonomy, right?
Right. So they've been collectively,
But what
positive.
we say is you can't have a strong collective or strong society without a strong individual. So you need both autonomies. You need the autonomy of the individual, and you need the autonomy of the collective group, the society, or whatever you're part of, the community that you're part of.
Yeah, but that's not what's being taught. What's being taught is that you as the individual don't matter unless you're connected to some other entity.
Right.
And that's wrong.
That's very wrong.
It's corporate.
To do what we have done, had we become part of an entity, we would not be able to do what we're doing.
Right.
Exactly.
So everybody's, like we like to say, you become a corporate report, right? Meaning not the thing that comes out every year that tells you what the corporation is doing. It's the person that reports to the corporation as an employee or as an associate or whatever title they want to give you, right? So
it's yes, ma'am, no, ma'am.
Right, exactly. And so this is basically a fascism in the form of corporate policy and procedure.
Yeah. So I think that I'm hoping that our audience, even those who are, maybe have grown children and they're no longer having to worry about their children being in the present day school system, they still have grandchildren. You still do have grandchildren, and I think everybody needs to be fully aware of what's happening to the minds of our little ones, and how they're being warped.
Right. And let's remember, it's not just about our kids, because some of us don't have kids.
Right.
Some of
Like
us
we don't
still
have
be
kids.
into
Right.
the system, but we need to understand that this is not just about coming after our kids. It's about coming after us as well, because at our ages, we would fit into the cogs as being reskilled.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're no longer able to work, well, the state takes care of us.
Mm-hmm.
Just look at Estonia, because Mark Tucker, when the crap hit the fan over him, okay, he went to Estonia and used that as a model. And the state of Maryland is the test state for that same system. And it's where, from cradle to grave, the state's got your backside.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's, if we have a friend in Baltimore who I think is seeing that. Now she's in the arts, she's a DJ, a performer, and she's, out of school, and I don't think she has kids or anything like that. But I think that in general, she's starting to see that cradle to grave in those initiatives that are reshaping your human experience, really.
Yeah. If you want to find that particular article, you'd go on the blog. It's commoncorediva.com. Type in Mark Tucker.
Okay.
Okay. And you should be able to find it. There'll be several articles, and I've got some screenshots in the articles that I've done, JP and Julie, where I've said, don't be like this person, because this is what they're supporting.
Good.
Okay.
Excellent.
And that's commoncorediva.com.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. It is.
Now, so we're coming up, we're over the hour mark. I can't believe how quickly this is gone.
Okay.
And we just so full of information, and I just cannot thank you enough for coming on again and bringing us all back to what's really important. Like I said at the very beginning of this talk today, other issues which don't really mean anything are what's dominating social media.
Right.
And it's frustrating to me, because I live in an environment that is so, I'm watching the oppression of the children take place. Just yesterday, the local school district in my neighborhood was so proud that a local bank was participating in some kind of new initiative, and they were giving away little packages of school supplies as a little treat, for being involved in the school district. And I'm like, why is a local bank involved in
not even
school?
Local? It's PNC. It's a major bank.
Major bank, PNC.
Oh my goodness! Oh yes, they have invested so much money in character education.
Right.
Oh wow.
Oh wow.
What is that?
Okay,
Whoops. Can you hear us?
Okay, there we are. Okay.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what happened.
All right. Yeah. So, Julie, repeat what you...
Before we sign off, please tell us about PNC's involvement in character education.
I'm trying to remember. It's been eons since I've written the article. I know that we've got several financial institutions that are putting their 2 cents into education. If it's not skill-based, it's going to be through character development. And that is, your attitude, your values, your beliefs.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So that's along the lines of what we've been saying, this behavioral modification.
Absolutely. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, but don't lose this. And we could probably do another show on this if you want to. But by 2027, the social and emotional market, now it never even used to be a market, but it has become its own genre, is expected to make upwards of $3 billion in profits.
And what was that again?
Social and emotional learning market system. So in other words, if we have that goes along with what you just said, the behavior stuff. It didn't even used to exist as an industry, but now it has become such a big deal that it's its own industry, and it's set to make billions off of remolding not just your children's attitudes, values, and beliefs, but everyone's.
Wow.
So we can do another show on that if you want.
Yeah, I think that would be really, really beneficial.
Yeah, for sure. Wow.
So 2027 is the target for that.
Yeah, by 2027. So, they could surpass that, because if you look at the number of products out there, if you look at the number of ads out there, if you look at the number of pharmaceuticals, if you look at the number of insurance programs that are saying, come on.
Sure.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay.
I just wanted to touch on one more thing before we go, and I'd like you to come back to something we were talking about. You were talking about educational savings accounts, and I wanted you to go into a little more depth on that. What is that about?
It's basically setting your family up for when you take the education savings account. It's basically saying, sign me up to be data tracked, because that it attaches digitally to your identity. And the reason I know this is because here in North Carolina, we have what's called a common follow-up number that is attached to all this. So the minute that I enter the public school system at any age, I get one of these unique numbers. Okay. Other states call them unique identifier numbers. Okay. Ours just happens to be stupid enough to call it the common follow-up number. It's not your social security card. Okay. That's another data tracker as well, but it's totally separate. And the whole goal is to track your learning to where you go to work.
Right. Okay.
So that's what these education savings accounts technically are. They're a digital dollar attached to your child or your student, because let's face it, they can be used for adults as well. The college savings accounts, the 529s, and you'll find that the reason why these are still around, JP, is because you have big names in government, whether they're still in power or not, who are behind this. Every supposed conservative group is behind this. A lot of liberal groups are coming up to support these ed savings accounts, because they think they're such the savior, especially in the name of COVID relief. But what we're finding out is that it is taking away your choice, because that's what, remember that $10,000 grant. Oh yes, we'll give you the money, but then we're going to tell you how to spend it. Well, the ed savings accounts do it, but just on a smaller level and a more consistent level. They're being sold as the greatest thing since sliced bread. But what people are not understanding is that these will affect your tax base, and it will somehow impede your voting rights as well. And I'm going to be doing some work on that angle throughout the rest of the year, because people need to understand this is more about your tax. It's more than just your tax dollar being used against you.
Wow.
How could it affect your voting rights? That's
what I need to find out.
Yeah, please. Do something on that.
The reason I want to do that is it's huge, and people aren't thinking that. But as Charlotte Iserbeat has told us, that the school choice, the education savings accounts that come with them, that's our new Trojan horse.
Okay.
So that's why I want to pick up on it, because she and I have done so much along the lines of each other that supports her many, many years of research. I mean, let's face it, she put in 40 some odd years of whistleblowing. And so we've got to keep whistleblowing. And that's why you guys need to keep going, and I need to keep going, because you're right. We have to look beyond these distractions. The flavor of the month is what I call them.
Because they really are. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a big one going on in Canada right now.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
man.
Yeah. Can you say color revolution? Okay, so yeah. All right. So well, it's been great to have you again, and
Yeah.
and I think we should follow up definitely
Okay.
on these other initiatives that are taking place to
Okay.
just pummel our society and humanity in
Right.
general,
Right.
and
Right.
Okay.
just
Sounds super. And thank you guys again. I always love chatting with you.
we always
Yeah.
enjoy talking to you as well.
Always. It's always such a pleasure. We'll go ahead and put you in the green room, and
Okay.
we'll do a quick follow-up after we say goodbye to our audience.
Great.
Okay.
All right.
Sounds good.
All right, cool. So once again, you can go to commoncorediva.com and find out all the information that Lynne has been talking about today.
For quite a while.
She's been at this for a while. She hasn't been at it as long as her colleague, but I have to say there's a lot here.
Yeah, there really is.
And it's always enlightening to find out what's going on.
Right.
We mentioned Julianne Romanello earlier, because we were watching one of hers. You can go look at her work as well. And you can find her on Facebook, but I'm not sure what she
I think
has
she's
out
very
there.
prominent on Facebook.
Yeah.
And we should probably get her on
Back-
as well.
yeah, bring her
Maybe the
back.
two of them together.
That would be awesome.
That would be
Yeah,
interesting.
that would
What
be
a great,
cool.
because they're both saying the same exact thing.
Right.
One thing too, really quickly before we wrap up, I'm finding that a lot of the initiatives that people were really concerned about that were coming out in 2012, like the Affordable Care Act, the health savings accounts and things like that, I find that when I listen to Lynne, talk about what's going on in the education industry, that it's mirroring the same kind of legislation that was passed under the Obama administration, under the guise of, helping us with our health. And so on the other side of a lot of these things, which seem really beneficial, comes it's sort of the carrot and the stick.
Right.
Like if you didn't pay into the Health Savings Act or the Affordable Care Act, through your taxes, then you were penalized at the end of the year. And that affected us actually.
Yeah. And by quite a bit.
And so I'm wondering if that's the same kind of carrot stick approach with these education initiatives.
Well, it
as
sounds
well.
like it. It sounds like
if you don't do this, then you're going to end up paying more in the long run through your taxes.
That would be interesting to follow up with.
Yeah.
But certainly you get a stick if you, you take the carrot, but there's a stick behind that carrot now, with this thing, because it's like once you sign up for it, then that means you have to follow those rules and codes.
Exactly.
So, suddenly, if you used to believe that, you attained immunity in naturally, and you didn't worry about viruses so much. Suddenly, being scared of one single virus and masking yourself up, that tells you that there's something going on there in the background.
Right.
You know, so
punishment.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh well, you took the money. Now you have to believe this.
Right.
This is what we're telling you to believe because you took the money. All right.
The money they took away in the first place.
Exactly.
Right,
And that's the other thing that, I think that we were listening to UK Column the other day, and they were talking about how, they're punishing people for accepting the benefits that are paid for through your tax dollars, but then making you jump through hoops or punishing you for doing that, or taking it away and making you work harder to get it, even though you've paid into the system to get those benefits. So they're not really benefits. They're more of like something that you've paid into that should, truly affect, the true common good, or the true, common world, but, society. So we are all being punished for being humans now.
We are. And I think we can really, really, land on that statement when we look at the kind of work that Lynne Taylor over at Common Core Diva does, where she, not only is she concerned about, the children and the way they're being programmed, but she's looking at the long game, which is how we have been looking at this whole thing from the very beginning as well, which is that everybody is going to be impacted by this.
Well, yeah.
All human beings on the planet will be impacted by everything. Education, health, technology.
And if you didn't see our last interview with Trent Luce, go back and watch that, because he talks about this very same thing in regard to farming.
Into farming and agriculture.
Exactly. So, we're being affected on all fronts. So it's important to pay attention.
We want to thank you guys for joining us today. This was one of our, most fun conversations. We absolutely adore Lynne. She is such a sparkly personality and delivering such, intense news.
Dire news.
Kind of like Mary Poppins. I love it. I love having her on, and I hope that you guys have received the information that she's sharing, that you're able to really process it and make the best decisions for your lives. Thank you for our Rockfin supporters for donating to our channel. Thank you for our Patreon, for our patron supporters for sticking with us. You're still hanging in there. We really appreciate that. And share our work around.
And if you aren't a Rockfin member, you can still help us out by putting money in that tip jar. It's on our page. And just, when you're watching this, go ahead and tip us. So, that's great. You can go to our website, book-of-hours.com, and you can see us on all the channels. So I guess that's it.
Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for joining today.
We'll see you next time.
We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
By the way.
Yeah? What is it?
I stole this idea from Ken Nordine.
It's a good one.
Pullquote is made possible by our patrons and supporters.
That's patreon.com/bookofhours.
Right, and you can also join Rockfin or leave us a tip.
Oh, right, rockfin.com/bookofhours.
Thank you.
Oh, and thank you.